After 15 years of working homicide in downtown Chicago, I had finally found what seemed like paradise. Maple Creek Estates, a quiet suburban neighborhood with actual trees, actual space between houses, and most importantly, actual silence. No sirens, no gunshots, no constant rush of humanity pressed against each other in concrete towers. I purchased the corner lot with the big oak tree. The previous owners had let the lawn grow wild, but I saw potential there. A place to breathe, a place to heal, a place where my wife and children could feel safe after years of me coming home with the weight of the city on my shoulders. "This is it," I told my wife Jennifer as we stood in the empty living room that first day. No more scanner noise keeping us up, no more looking over our shoulders. The first week passed in blissful quietude. I spent my mornings on the porch with coffee, watching birds instead of watching for suspicious characters. I discovered the simple pleasure of yard work. There was something deeply satisfying about tamming that overgrown lawn, about the smell of fresh cut grass, about standing back and seeing actual results from your labor. In police work, victories were rarely so visible. It was during my second weekend, just as I was finishing the back corner of my lawn, that I first noticed him. A tall man with a military posture walking with deliberate steps down the center of our street. He wore aviator sunglasses despite the cloudy weather, khaki pants pressed with perfect creases, and a blue polo shirt with some kind of emblem on the chest. Most noticeably, he carried a clipboard and had what appeared to be some sort of badge clipped to his belt. I turned off the mower to take a water break, and that was when he changed course and headed directly toward me. "Good morning," he called out, his voice carrying an unearned authority. "I do not believe we have met yet. Randy Carlson, head HOA enforcement officer." He extended his hand, and I shook it, nodding his overly firm grip, the kind men use when they are trying to establish dominance. "Jack Thompson," I replied simply, "just moved in last week." Randy nodded, making a show of writing something on his clipboard. "I see you are getting the lawn under control. That is good. The previous owners were problematic with compliance." I nodded politely, though something about his phrasing felt off. 15 years in law enforcement teaches you to read people, and everything about this man screamed overcompensation. "I should inform you that power equipment operation is restricted to between the hours of 9 in the morning and 7 in the evening," he continued, pointing at my lawnmower. "You started at approximately 7:45 this morning, which violates our quiet hours policy." I glanced at my watch. It was nearly 10. "I actually started about 20 minutes ago," I corrected him gently. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Nevertheless, familiarize yourself with the regulations. We maintain strict standards here to preserve property values and community harmony." As he spoke, I noticed Mrs. Chen from across the street hurriedly taking in her wind chimes as Randy's gaze drifted toward her house. The elderly man 2 doors down quickly moved his garbage can from the curb, though garbage day was tomorrow. "I will be sure to review all the materials," I assured him, maintaining my professional police courtesy despite the strange encounter. "See that you do. We have a 3-strike system here before we move to financial penalties," Randy said, turning to leave. "Welcome to Maple Creek." I watched him continue down the street, stopping to speak with another neighbor about their mailbox decorations. There was something unsettling about the way people responded to him, not with neighborly warmth, but with nervous compliance. Jennifer came outside with lemonade, watching Randy disappear around the corner. "Who was that?" she asked. "Apparently our neighborhood watchdog," I replied. "Head HOA enforcement officer." "Is that even a real position?" she wondered. I shrugged, but the question lingered. In my experience, people who flaunted authority so openly were often the ones who deserved it least. I restarted my mower and continued my work, but part of my mind remained on Randy and his clipboard and that badge that had looked just a little too shiny, a little too prominent on his hip. I had moved here for peace and quiet, to escape the constant tension of urban policing. But something told me that my professional instincts would not be resting as much as I had hoped. The following Tuesday morning, I opened my front door to retrieve the newspaper and found something jarring affixed to the wood. A bright yellow piece of paper, clearly designed to mimic an official citation, was taped at eye level. Bold black letters proclaimed, "Community Standards Violation Notice." I pulled it down and read through the details. According to this document, I had violated Maple Creek Ordinance 15.3b noise pollution by operating lawn equipment outside of designated hours. The citation claimed I had mowed my lawn at 7:45 a.m. on Saturday despite community guidelines prohibiting such activity before 9:00 a.m. At the bottom was a signature, R. Carlson, Head Enforcement Officer, accompanied by an official-looking stamp. The document stated that this was my first formal warning, and further violations would result in financial penalties starting at $100. I brought the citation inside, where Jennifer was preparing breakfast for our 2 children. "What is that?" she asked, noticing my expression. "Apparently I have been served with an HOA violation," I replied, placing the paper on the kitchen island. I spent the next hour hunting through the community documentation we had received upon moving in. The welcome packet contained bylaws, community guidelines, and various forms, but nowhere could I find anything about noise restrictions or mowing hours. I checked the HOA website and found a basic outline of architectural guidelines and trash collection schedules, but nothing resembling the ordinance Randy had cited. That afternoon, I spotted Randy making his rounds, clipboard in hand, sunglasses firmly in place despite the overcast day. I waited until he approached the Johnson house across the street before walking over to him. "Good afternoon, Randy," I called out pleasantly. He turned, straightening his posture even more. "Mr. Thompson, how can I help you?" I held up the yellow citation. "I received this morning and had some questions. I cannot seem to find Ordinance 15.3b in any of the community documents." Randy's face tightened slightly. "That is because the noise ordinance was passed at the quarterly meeting last month. The documentation has not been updated yet." "I see," I nodded thoughtfully. "Could you point me to the meeting minutes then? I would like to understand exactly what the parameters are." "Meeting minutes are confidential to board members," he responded quickly. "But I can assure you that mowing before 9 in the morning is explicitly prohibited." "Who exactly comprises the HOA board?" I asked. "I would like to introduce myself since I am new to the community." Randy shifted his weight, a classic tell of discomfort I had observed in countless interrogations. "The board meets privately for security reasons. I act as their public liaison and enforcement arm." As he spoke, I paid closer attention to the badge clipped to his belt. From a distance, it had a vague appearance of officialdom, but up close, I could now see it clearly. It was not an HOA badge or any kind of official identification. It was a novelty security badge, the kind you might buy at a costume shop or online for $20. The words "security volunteer" were barely visible beneath a generic eagle emblem. "I understand," I said, maintaining my cordial tone. "By the way, interesting badge. Where did you get your authority as head enforcement officer?" Randy's hand moved automatically to cover the badge. "I was appointed by the board 3 years ago. Now, if you will excuse me, I have several properties to inspect this afternoon." He walked away briskly, his back rigid with tension. I returned home, the yellow citation still in my hand, my suspicions now fully aroused. Jennifer looked at me questioningly. "I think our HOA enforcer may not be who he claims to be," I said quietly. "What do you mean?" she asked. "That badge he wears is fake, and I am beginning to think his authority might be as well." I sat down at my computer and began searching for information on Maple Creek's actual HOA structure. As chief of police for the neighboring district, I had access to county records and property associations. What I discovered confirmed my suspicions. There was indeed an HOA for Maple Creek Estates, but nowhere in their organizational chart was there a position called Head Enforcement Officer. And more tellingly, there was no Randy Carlson listed among the board members or employees. Over the next 2 weeks, Randy's presence in the neighborhood became increasingly intrusive. No longer content with simply patrolling the streets, He began actively seeking confrontations with residents. Each day brought new stories of his intimidation tactics. Mrs. Chen came to my door in tears one evening, holding a citation claiming her bird feeder violated height restrictions. The elderly Mr. Patterson received a notice that his American flag was displayed incorrectly and faced a $150 fine. The Rodriguez family found their children's basketball hoop had been tagged with a removal order, citing unsanctioned recreational equipment. What troubled me most was watching how people responded, with fear rather than resistance. These were working families, retired couples, busy parents. They did not have time to research HOA bylaws or challenge self-appointed authorities. They simply paid the fines or removed the violations to avoid further conflict. I began documenting everything. I set up a discreet camera near my front window to record Randy's daily patrols. I collected copies of citations from neighbors who were willing to share them. I compiled dates, times, and detailed accounts of each interaction. The situation reached a breaking point when I witnessed Randy attempting to have Sarah Jenkins' car towed from her own driveway. I was working in my garage when I heard raised voices and stepped outside to see Randy standing beside an old flatbed tow truck. The driver looked uncertain as Randy gestured emphatically at Sarah's sedan. "It has not been moved in 3 days, which violates our 72-hour stationary vehicle policy," Randy was insisting. Sarah, a single mother of 2 who worked night shifts as a nurse, was nearly in tears. "I have been working double shifts at the hospital. The car works fine. You cannot just take it." I approached calmly, cell phone recording in my pocket. "Is there a problem here?" Randy spun around. "This is HOA business, Mr. Thompson. I would like to see the documentation authorizing the towing of a vehicle from private property," I said calmly. The tow truck driver looked between us. "Yeah, man, I need to see some official paperwork. I cannot just take someone's car." Randy fumbled in his clipboard. "The authorization is being processed, but as HOA enforcement." "Maybe you should wait for that authorization," I suggested to the driver. The man nodded, already backing toward his truck. "Call me when you have the proper papers," he muttered to Randy before driving away. Randy's face flushed with anger. "You are interfering with community standards enforcement, Thompson. That will be noted." After he stormed off, Sarah thanked me profusely. "He has everyone terrified," she whispered. "No one knows what to do." That evening, a loud pounding on my front door interrupted dinner. Randy stood on my porch, holding an official-looking document with red lettering across the top. "This is your formal notice to appear before the HOA Compliance Board tomorrow at 7 p.m., he announced loudly enough for the entire street to hear. "Failure to appear will result in automatic finding of guilt and escalating penalties." I accepted the paper calmly. "And where exactly is this hearing taking place?" "The community center meeting room," he replied. "Do not be late." After closing the door, I examined the document. It was impressively official-looking, complete with letterhead and seals, but full of grammatical errors and vague citations of non-existent bylaws. Jennifer looked worried. "Jack, this is getting out of hand. Maybe we should just move. We have only been here 3 weeks." Our children watched silently from the table, their dinner forgotten. "No," I said firmly. "This man is terrorizing an entire neighborhood through intimidation and fraud. Running would only leave everyone else to deal with him." That night, I made a decision. I had spent my career upholding the law and protecting people from those who would abuse power. I would not, stand by while Randy continued his charade of authority. It was time to end his reign of neighborhood terror, and I had just the plan to do it. "Tomorrow," I promised my family, "this situation changes completely." Saturday morning dawned clear and bright. I deliberately waited until 8:30 to wheel my lawnmower out of the garage, just enough before Randy's invented quiet hours to ensure he would notice. My police training had taught me that sometimes you need to set a trap to catch a predator. Today, Randy was walking right into mine. Sure enough, I had barely finished my first row when I spotted them coming down the sidewalk. Randy was in the lead, wearing what appeared to be a complete security guard uniform this time. Not just the polo shirt, but also dark pants with a stripe down the side and a utility belt. Behind him walked two middle-aged men I had seen occasionally at his side before, now similarly dressed in matching vests with Community Patrol handwritten across the back. Most tellingly, one carried a smartphone on a selfie stick, recording everything. This was to be a public shamming then, an example made for the whole neighborhood. I continued mowing, pretending not to notice their approach. Several neighbors had come outside, ostensibly to check their mail or water plants, but their anxious glances told the real story. They were watching, waiting to see what would happen. "Jack Thompson," Randy's voice boomed across my lawn. "Shut off that equipment immediately." I turned off the mower and straightened, feigning surprise. "Good morning, Randy. Is there a problem?" "You are in direct violation of Noise Ordinance 15.3b for the third time," he announced, his voice carrying for theatrical effect. "According to HOA bylaws, repeated violations constitute willful noncompliance and grounds for community action." His two companions moved to flank him, creating a semicircle around me. The camera continued recording. "And what community action would that be?" I asked innocently. Randy pulled something from his back pocket, a pair of plastic handcuffs, the kind sold in costume shops for Halloween. "As head enforcement officer, I am placing you under citizen's arrest for repeated violations and resistance to community authority." A gasp went up from several watching neighbors. Mrs. Chen covered her mouth in shock. The Rodriguez children stopped their play to stare. "Citizen's arrest," I repeated calmly. "Could you please explain what law I have broken that would justify that?" Randy stepped forward confidently. "HOA regulations have legal standing in the state of Illinois as binding contractual obligations. Your continued defiance constitutes breach of contract and disturbing the peace." He reached for my wrist, plastic handcuffs ready. "Place your hands behind your back, please." I stood perfectly still, looking him directly in the eye. "Before you do that, Randy, I have something I need to show you." Slowly, deliberately, I reached into my back pocket and withdrew my badge, my real badge. The gold shield of the chief of police caught the morning sunlight, gleaming with authentic authority. "Chief Jack Thompson, Lakeside Police Department," I stated clearly, holding the badge where his camera could capture it perfectly. "And you are now under investigation for impersonation of authority, fraud, harassment, and attempted unlawful detention." The color drained from Randy's face. The plastic handcuffs fell from his suddenly limp fingers. His two companions backed away, the camera now pointed at the ground. There must be some mistake," Randy stammered. "No mistake," I replied evenly. "For weeks, you have presented yourself as an official with powers you do not possess. You have issued fraudulent citations, attempted to levy fake fines, and now attempted to detain a citizen without legal authority. Each of these actions constitutes a criminal offense." The watching neighbors had gone completely silent. Even the birds seemed to pause. "This was a community exercise," Randy attempted. "A neighborhood watch program." "Save it for your statement," I replied. "As of this moment, you are the subject of an official police investigation. I suggest you retain legal counsel immediately." Randy's companions were already halfway down the block, all pretense of authority abandoned. Randy himself seemed frozen in place, his entire fabricated identity crumbling before the neighborhood's eyes. "You cannot do this," he whispered. I stepped closer, my voice low but firm. "I am not doing this because you bothered me, Randy. I am doing this because you have terrorized an entire community through deception and intimidation. That ends today." I turned my back on him deliberately, a show of just how unthreatening I found him, and restarted my lawnmower. After a few moments of standing there helplessly, Randy finally turned and walked away, his shoulders slumped, his clipboard hanging limply at his side. The neighbors remained, watching in stunned silence as the self-appointed king of Maple Creek Estates retreated in defeat. Monday morning, I walked into the Lakeside Police Department not as a new resident of Maple Creek, but as its chief of police. I called my most trusted detective, Sarah Martinez, into my office and laid out the situation. "I need this by the book," I explained. "No shortcuts, no special treatment either for or against him. This has to be a clean investigation." Detective Martinez nodded. "We will start with statements from the neighbors." Over the next 2 weeks, a steady stream of Maple Creek residents came forward. Mrs. Chen described how Randy had collected over $300 in cash, fines, for supposed bird feeder violations. The Rodriguez family brought in a recording of Randy threatening to put a lien on their house for their children's basketball hoop. Mr. Patterson showed us a falsified document claiming his flag display was unpatriotic because it faced west instead of east. "How long has this been going on?" I asked during a community meeting we organized at the actual HOA office. "Almost 15 months, said Bill Hawkins, the elected HOA president, a position Randy had apparently invented a superior version of. At first, he just seemed like an enthusiastic volunteer. Then he started carrying that clipboard and badge." "Did no one question him?" Detective Martinez asked. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. "He was so convincing," Mrs. Jenkins finally said. "He had documents, forms, official-looking notices. He knew everyone's names, property details. We just assumed he was authorized by someone." The social psychology at play was fascinating and disturbing. One man with enough confidence and props had managed to hold an entire community hostage through nothing but bluster. The investigation took a darker turn when we discovered Randy's history. This was not his first neighborhood. He had pulled similar schemes in 2 previous communities before residents eventually caught on. Each time, he simply moved to a new area and started over. With a judge's approval, we executed a search warrant on Randy's home. What we found was astonishing. An entire room dedicated to his fantasy of authority, multiple uniforms hanging neatly in rows, a professional-grade printer for creating fake citations, rubber stamps and official-looking seals, and most damning, a ledger recording over $14,000 in collected fines from neighbors. "He created an entire fake governmental body," Detective Martinez said as we cataloged the evidence, "complete with forms, procedures, and penalties." Even more disturbing were the files, detailed dossiers on every family in Maple Creek, including photographs of their homes, notes on their daily schedules, and assessments of how likely they were to comply or resist enforcement. My own file was recently created but already thick. Former law enforcement, potential problem, may require special handling. What had begun as a neighborhood annoyance had revealed itself as something far more sinister. A systematic campaign of intimidation and fraud that had extracted thousands of dollars from my neighbors while keeping them in constant fear. "Chief," Detective Martinez said, holding up a bank statement, "he opened an actual account called Maple Creek Enforcement Fund. This goes beyond power tripping. This is criminal enterprise." By the end of the month, we had compiled enough evidence for the district attorney to file multiple charges: criminal impersonation, fraud, harassment, attempted unlawful detention, and operating a criminal scheme. When we arrived at Randy's house with the arrest warrant, he had already packed his bags. But unlike his previous neighborhoods, this time he would not simply walk away and restart elsewhere. This time he would face justice. The county courthouse was unusually crowded on the morning of Randy's trial. Word had spread throughout Maple Creek and beyond. This was not just about one man's deception. It was about the vulnerability of communities to those who would exploit trust and manufacture fear. Randy had hired an expensive defense attorney from downtown Chicago, a slick operator in a suit that probably cost more than most of my neighbors made in a month. His strategy became clear during opening statements. Paint Randy as a misunderstood community volunteer who had perhaps been overzealous but meant well. "My client was attempting to maintain standards in a neighborhood he loves," the attorney argued. "If his methods were sometimes unorthodox, his intentions were always for the betterment of the community." The prosecutor, a no-nonsense veteran named Margaret Chen, coincidentally sharing a surname with one of Randy's victims, laid out the case methodically. This defendant created an elaborate fraud, she countered. He invented authority he did not have, extracted money through deception, and used fear to control an entire neighborhood. This was not overzealousness. It was a criminal enterprise. When my turn came to testify, I walked to the witness stand in full uniform. I had debated wearing civilian clothes, but decided the badge and uniform served an important symbolic purpose today. Randy had impersonated authority. I would represent its legitimate face. Chief Thompson, the prosecutor began, please describe your first encounters with the defendant. I detailed my initial meetings with Randy, my growing suspicions, and the moment he attempted to place me under citizen's arrest for mowing my lawn. During cross-examination, Randy's attorney tried a different approach. Chief Thompson, did my client ever actually claim to be a police officer? No, I acknowledged. He claimed to be an HOA enforcement officer, a position that does not exist. And is it not true that you deliberately set a trap for my client by mowing during what you knew he considered restricted hours? I leaned forward slightly. I performed a legal activity on my own property. If Mr. Carlson chose to respond with an illegal attempt at detention, that was his decision. One by one, my neighbors took the stand. Mrs. Chen tearfully described handing over her grocery money to pay fake fines. Mr. Patterson, a Vietnam veteran, recounted his humiliation when Randy publicly berated him about his American flag. The Rodriguez children testified about how they stopped playing outside for fear of breaking rules. The most damning testimony came from the actual HOA board president, who confirmed that Randy had never held any official position whatsoever. We have a 3-person architectural committee that sends polite letters about violations, he explained. Never citations, never fines, and certainly never confrontations on people's lawns. When Randy finally took the stand in his own defense, his carefully constructed persona had completely collapsed. Gone were the rigid posture and authoritative voice. Instead, he appeared small, defensive, and utterly ordinary. I was just trying to help maintain standards, he insisted repeatedly. People were not following the rules. What rules specifically? The prosecutor asked. The community rules, he stammered. Rules that you invented, she pressed. After a brief silence, he admitted, some of them needed clarification. The judge, an older woman with a reputation for no-nonsense justice, watched the proceedings with increasingly visible disapproval. When both sides had presented their cases, she delivered her verdict and sentence with clear disgust. Mr. Carlson, you did not simply break the law. You manipulated and terrorized an entire community through elaborate deception. You exploited people's respect for authority and their desire to be good neighbors. Randy was sentenced to 18 months probation, 200 hours of community service, full restitution of all fines collected, and perhaps most fittingly, a restraining order barring him from serving on any HOA or community organization for 10 years. As the gavel fell, I watched my neighbors' shoulders collectively relax, as if a heavy weight had finally been lifted from an entire community. The Saturday after Randy's sentencing, something remarkable happened in Maple Creek Estates. It began with Mr. Patterson raising a new American flag on a taller pole than before. By noon, Mrs. Chen had hung 3 different wind chimes and a bird feeder. The Rodriguez children's basketball hoop reappeared, joined by a hockey net. It was as if the neighborhood itself was exhaling after holding its breath for so long. That afternoon, the real HOA board called an emergency community meeting at the local elementary school cafeteria. Nearly every household attended. First, began Bill Hawkins, the actual board president, we want to apologize. While we did not know what Randy was doing, we should have been more present and visible in the community. That absence created the space for his deception. They outlined a complete restructuring of the HOA. Transparent meetings open to all residents, posted minutes, clear and simple bylaws, and most importantly, no enforcement officers of any kind. We do have a committee that reminds folks about guidelines, Bill explained. But they send polite emails, not citations, and they certainly do not carry badges. Then, to my surprise, Bill turned to me. Chief Thompson, we would like to ask for your help. Would you consider heading a new community safety committee, not for enforcement, just for bringing neighbors together and establishing genuine community standards? I looked around the room at the faces of people who had been terrorized for over a year before I arrived. They needed not just freedom from fear, but a positive vision to replace it. I would be honored, I replied, but only if we agree on one fundamental principle. This neighborhood belongs to all of us equally. No badges, no clipboards, no fear. The next month brought a transformation. Neighbors who had hidden inside their homes now chatted across driveways. Children played freely on the streets. Garden decorations and personal touches appeared as people reclaimed their spaces. The Rodriguez family organized a block party, something Randy had explicitly forbidden as a zoning violation. More than 60 neighbors attended, sharing food and stories, and finally building the connections that make a community real. As for me, I returned to my Saturday morning ritual. At precisely 8:30, I fired up my lawnmower and began the satisfying work of maintaining my property. Several neighbors waved as they did the same. No one complained about the noise. Jennifer brought me lemonade halfway through, smiling as she surveyed the neighborhood. You know, after everything that happened, I actually love it here now. Me too, I agreed. Strange how things work out. What had begun as a simple move to the suburbs for peace and quiet had become something much more meaningful. I had not just found a home, I had helped free a community from fear. Later that afternoon, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset, Mrs. Chen approached with a plate of homemade cookies and a small wind chime. For your oak tree, she said, offering the wind chime, now that we can have them again. As the gentle tones caught the evening breeze, I reflected on the strange journey of the past few months. It had started with a man and his clipboard trying to control when I could mow my lawn. It ended with a neighborhood rediscovering its voice, its freedom, and its connections to one another. Sometimes justice comes from courtrooms and badges, but sometimes it starts with something as simple as refusing to be bullied about when you can mow your lawn, and having the courage to stand up not just for yourself, but for an entire community. In the end, the grass was just the beginning.